Welcome back. Ongoing coverage of the NFL Draft and a Thursday night, which was kind of legendary by Raven standards. All of it's brought to you by Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. Branches now throughout Baltimore and Maryland. Over the weekend, if you get a chance to go to the buyatoyota.com audio vault, you can hear our Be More Positive community and charity conversations, all brought to you by Howard Bank, as well as our friends at Cole Roofing. And Billy Cole's already texted me wanting to talk about Hayden Hurst and about Lamar Jackson. Luke Jones joins us now on the backside of having attended late-night press conferences and, the shock of them dealing back into the first round when some folks had gone to bed and forgotten about it. You wake up, you got a quarterback. You wake up, there's no second-round draft pick. But, Luke, more than anything, you wake up and, for 5 months we've been sitting around here, who are they going to draft, Not just Lamar Jackson. We got plenty of time to talk about that. But Hayden Hurst will be the first guy to get onto the field. And the Ravens passed on a number of players at 16, then passed on a number of players at 22, including DJ Moore, including Calvin Ridley, including a whole bunch of linemen and a whole bunch of other players. But Hayden Hurst was the apple of their eye, obviously, right? I mean, they kept backing up, and they got a kid they really liked.
Well, I don't know if necessarily he specifically is the apple of their eye. It was just they had a group of players in mind that they felt that they could move back from 16, they could move back again, and they would be comfortable taking one of them. Now, we saw DJ Moore go off the board at 24 to Carolina, hypothetically speaking. Were the Ravens eyeing him up? Maybe. But they clearly had a comfort level that they felt Hayden Hurst, not at 16 but at 25, would be appropriate value, which I think is fair when you look at where most of the draft pundits had him ranked. It was typically late first round. Some people had him early second round. But he's definitely an interesting player. I mean, a former baseball player. He's older. He's going to be 25 years old, so that's something that typically is a strike against you, although Joe Ortiz and company after the first round noted that Dennis Pitta was older, but Dennis Pitta they took much later in the draft. But Hayden Hurst, unlike some of the other pass-catching options, like a Mike Gesicki, for example, he's considered a much better blocker in addition to being that guy that can be a contributor as a receiver. So I think the big question with Hurst, beyond the age, which that to me isn't as big of a deal, because a guy needs to prove that he's worthy of a second contract before you worry about that part of the equation. But I think the big question is, how quickly can Hayden Hurst get up to speed? We know the typical learning curve for a rookie tight end, and this team does not have any other pass-catching tight ends. Nick Boyle and Max Williams are both blockers. I think that's become very clear over the last couple of years. So they need Hurst to come in and be that guy that can be effective on third down over the middle of the field, that guy that might be able to beat a linebacker in coverage down the seam. So if he can do those things, then you like the Ravens' passing offense more than you might have liked it going into this draft. But in the case of Hurst, a pretty reliable player at South Carolina. I mean, you look at his numbers. He only caught 3 touchdowns. It's not as though this was a red zone machine, but as a guy who generally caught everything thrown his way, I think he moves around well enough that you feel good about him at the tight end position. And the last 2 years caught a combined 92 passes for the Gamecocks. So I think certainly I look at that move, and I can't say he was my favorite tight end in this draft, but certainly liked him, and I think especially
they liked him, right? I mean, so that they liked him, and I don't.
Well, every team likes the players they draft. But I hear what you're saying.
But at that point, you can name every player behind him and say they liked him more than they liked Mike Gesicki, or they liked him more than they liked Orlando Brown. We can go through any number of the discussions we've had the last 4 months, which is one of the things when they actually pull that guy off the board, whether it's Marlon Humphrey, which was a little shocking, I thought, last year. I wasn't shocked by Hayden Hurst. I saw him mocked to them by too many people who know what's going on to think that was crazy. So I wasn't shocked to see his name come off the board.
I agree with that, yeah. I mean, I think tight end was their biggest need. I mean, certainly we could talk about them adding another wide receiver, and I think that's still something that should be on the table because they don't have long-term options on this roster, and you better get some if Lamar Jackson's going to be the guy in a couple years. So I think that's still on the table. Offensive line's still on the table, but as far as a pass-catching tight end, the cupboard was completely bare there. So I think with their first-round pick, they did address their biggest need. And in the case of Hurst, you hope maybe the fact that he is older, that he has filled out more than the typical 21-year-old tight end coming out of college, that you hope that expedites the learning curve a little bit compared to your typical tight end. And they definitely they need him to step in and be a contributor from day one. That's going to be his starting job to lose.
Dude, if it doesn't work out, the Orioles can use him in the bullpen right now, right? I saw him pitch, and I Googled his minor league stats, just to see him do it. And they had a lot of high school footage of him as well, but not a whole lot of minor league footage for him. He didn't play a lot of baseball.
He did, and had Tommy John surgery as an 8th grader. So he pitched for in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. So maybe he'll exact some revenge against Pittsburgh.
I watched Tommy John pitch for the Dodgers in the 8th grade. Or was it the Yankees? It was the Yankees by then, I think. Yeah,
played 2 seasons in the Pirates organization. Was it just in the Gulf Coast League? So didn't get especially far. He was a pitcher, was a first baseman in his final year of minor league ball. So a pretty accomplished athlete. Certainly an interesting story as far as him getting a late start, and as far as his collegiate football career goes. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But yeah, if you had told me at the start of the night that the Ravens would take Hayden Hurst, I might have said I would potentially believe that at 16, let alone moving back to 25. So as far as the value, I'm okay with that. It just ultimately is the case with any player you take. There's truly no such thing as a lock as far as a guy being a sure thing. But I think for where they took him and what their needs were, Hayden Hurst certainly made a lot of sense.
He is Baltimore Luke on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. The Ravens still with picks ahead, more to go. You definitely want to be on the text service that we offer, brought to you by Coons Florida Security Boulevard. Of course, Dennis loves the draft, and we love giving you the draft coverage. And you were a little conflicted at 11, was it? I'm going to check the WNST text. I'll say this. It was the latest text in the history of WNST text services, right? 11:41 it came to me. So, and our first pick didn't happen until 10:53, well after the hockey game was over. Turns out I could have gone to the hockey game, come back, put my feet up, and still watch Hayden Hurst get drafted, right?
Right. And as far as that pick goes, 11:41 typically wouldn't send a text out that late. So anyone who was woken up by that, I apologize. But at the same time, take a quarterback.
Well, yeah, us and Dennis and Coons, we apologize for waking you up about them drafting a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, right, exactly. When you're talking about a franchise quarterback, when you're talking about such a pivotal point in the history of this organization, quite frankly, I think it was worthy of running the risk of waking someone up from their sleep. So definitely a strange night, definitely the most memorable draft that I've covered, and it's going to go down as one of the most memorable in franchise history, whether it's the start of the Lamar Jackson era and Lamar Jackson's leading the Ravens to Super Bowls 4 or 5 years from now, or whether it's Lamar Jackson being the next Kyle Bowler and costing Eric DaCosta and John Harbaugh and whoever else their job down the road. We know how these things can go. Franchise quarterbacks, when you draft one, it can be something that totally makes you, like it did with Joe Flacco 10 years ago. In fact, funny, the 10th anniversary of Joe Flacco being taken by the Ravens, they draft what you assume to be his replacement here sooner rather than later. But it can make your franchise, or it can cost people their jobs. So we'll see how it plays out. Certainly, it's going to be interesting.
All of our WNST draft coverage brought to you by our friends at King Discount Liquors. The Ravens draft is forcing you to drink. I've got a place for you. Lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. Don't forget this weekend, they're having an incredible bull roast, oyster roast, all that going on out at the Timonium OTB. It's King Liquors is involved with it, with all the Baltimore County Liquor Association folks. I want to send a shout out to all of them. I was supposed to go on Sunday. I'm doing the Caps game too, but I want to tell them to eat some pit beef and some oysters and put a little extra horseradish on it for me. King Discount Liquors, get the Rosedale and give the King a ring. They They've been with us for 15 years and keeping me drinking when we're in the playoffs and when we're drafting franchise quarterbacks at 11:41 at night. King Discount Liquors, Pulaski Highway. Give the King a ring. Also, Box Hill Pizzeria. I had never had the baklava at Box Hill Pizzeria. I can now say that I've checked that off the list as well. Get the gyros, get the pizza, but always get the crab cakes. Don't forget, you can go to boxhillpizzeria.com and ship them, and they're just as tasty when they're shipped. They are remodeling the dining room at Box Hill Pizzeria in Abingdon. Tell Tommy and Chris you'll see them up there once they get it all together. I keep seeing the pictures pop up on my social media. I'm like, at some point that thing's going to get done up there. It's going to look awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Maybe we'll have an event up there this summer at Box Hill Pizzeria in Harford County. The best crab cakes in Harford County can now be shipped anywhere. Also brought to you by Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender. You need Carl Delmont. Buying, selling, in that considering phase that my wife are in at this, and I are in 15 years into this thing at this point, living downtown. So wherever you are in that process, it's the most important thing you'll do financially. How you're going to invest with your home. Buying, selling, or thinking about it. Freedmont.com. There's a lot of education there. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. Consider our friends Carl Delmont and the folks at Freedmont Mortgage. Wearing my Brigade hat. They're going to play on Saturday against the Albany Empire. Ron Jaworski will be guesting with us next week as his Philadelphia Soul come down to the Royal Farms Arena. That happens next Friday. 2 Brigade games this week. You can learn more at BaltimoreBrigade.com as well as at Monumental Sports. We also chatted with head coach Omar Smith. You can hear that in the buyatoyota.com audio vault as well. Luke and I extending our draft conversation here well into the weekend. And, Luke, you called it I've called it shocking. It certainly was, and Ozzie had said back at the Liars Luncheon, I may surprise you or whatever. There may be some surprises, shock you, whatever. They got a pass catcher and they got a quarterback. These were the things we talked about for 3 months, right? Like, these were the questions being fired at Bisciotti when you and I were sitting in Minnesota watching that online. And, they got a kid that catches the ball, and they got a quarterback. Now what are they going to do, right? Like, is wide receiver still in play? And, the bottom line on the signing, the last 3 weeks, signing a wide receiver a week, every week it feels like for a month now, that they feel like they've done enough for Joe Flacco at that position this year to be better. And I don't know if they draft a wide receiver with this first pick in the 3rd round late into the night or the 2nd pick or whatever. Is that kid getting on the field this year? And where's Perryman stand in all this? Is he really gone? I mean, will he not even be running around during the preseason games to catch Lamar Jackson passes?
Well, I think that's really going to depend on if they take another wide receiver. I hear what you're saying on that. But I feel like we could have said this about, okay, they feel good about Jeremy Maclin and Mike Wallace, or they felt good about the guys they had the year before. I think at some point you need to, and Eric DeCosta said this about a month ago, at some point you need to take a swing and, try to find a young wide receiver. They don't have long-term answers at wide receiver. Michael Crabtree, the way that deal is structured, probably a second year. But, it depends how he plays. John Brown's on a 1-year contract. Willie Snead's on a 2-year deal. So I don't think we should be looking at that as not being a priority. I think they still need to be looking to add another wide receiver, especially considering this draft, the depth is supposed to be in the 2nd and 3rd round. Now, we'll see if some of these guys that are 2nd-round talents make it to the 3rd round, and the Ravens have a chance to take a swing there. But it's definitely going to be interesting. I think as much as I'm very much not buying this whole all-in trying to win now when you just took a quarterback with a 1st-round pick and gave up next year's 2nd-round pick to do it. But at the same time, you need to start putting talent around Lamar Jackson, and you got to see how that's going to play out from a. Man,
it's the first time you've ever said that. I want to frame that.
Well,
you have to start building talent around Lamar Jackson.
Because you didn't do it around. You didn't do it with Joe Flacco very well because, we see what position they're in now. So, we can debate whose fault that was, but clearly it's something they're going to have to do. So, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they proceed. I think the offensive line is still something that needs to be addressed. I'm still not selling or signing off on just letting Ryan Jensen walk and not renewing Austin Howard's contract and then assuming you're going to be fine with the internal options to replace them, I think you need to, at the very least, add some real competition there. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, they still have some picks here that can be impactful if they find the right guys, but we'll see how that works over the next couple of days, and see how much help they can get Joe Flacco for whatever time he has left here. And again, can you find a wide receiver of the future? And to your point, you're not going to draft a wide receiver at this stage expecting that player to start like you might have if you had taken DJ Moore in the first round. But certainly you can still look to find a wide receiver that can contribute and maybe develop and be, if not a number one, number two for you in the next couple years. So I still think there's work to do at that position. I'm not going to let the Ravens off the hook on that one just because they signed three guys that you've heard of, because keep in mind, all three of those guys are coming off of down seasons as well.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke at on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our coverage here brought to you by our friends at the Modell Lyric. Britt Floyd was Thursday night, but that's over with now, and next week we got Jackson Brown coming in on Thursday night with the great sounds of Somebody's Baby, The Loadout, Stay Just a Little Bit Longer. Yeah, there you go. Thursday night, Jackson Brown at the Modell Lyric. Kansas Steely Dan coming up in the fall. We'll be giving some tickets away there as well. You can learn more at modelllyric.com. Also, if you're a William Shatner fan, he's coming down there in a couple of weeks as well. All of it also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel. The entries now in our morning newspaper brought to you by Planet Fitness each and every morning, as well as on the front of WNST.net. We are a week past the Tessio, getting ready for the Preakness. My wife and I are headed down to Laurel for the Derby next Saturday. We're looking forward to that. Derby day. I've got a jacket picked out. My wife's got a pretty dress. Her hair's all long and curly. It's going to be a great day down at Laurel next Saturday for the Derby. Then, of course, the Preakness coming up with the Pink Festival on the 18th and the Preakness on the 19th. There'll be full coverage around here. And who knows, maybe Bob Baffert's Justify will win. I'm always a Baffert fan, as you know. Luke, second round gets lonely, right? But maybe not so, because as we learned late into the night when we were sending out 1140 WNST text on Thursday night, Ozzie might deal back into the second round. They have the first pick in the third round, right? And also another pick midway, sandwich pick in the middle of the third round. So you have to sort of sit and watch a bunch of names come off the board early into Friday night, which will, be of dismay to everyone, I'm sure. But still lots of names out there, and still a couple more picks on Friday night for the Ravens to go wide receiver, or find a tackle, or find a center, or pick a rush end, or take a chance on a safety, or whatever. But all that's going to unfold here. There's still a lot of draft left here.
Yeah, there still is, and to try to figure out who exactly is going to be there when they're going to be sitting out at least most of the second round. I am in agreement with you that they should have the draft capital, that if they'd want to move into the end of the second round, they could, without too much issue, I would say there. But ultimately, you have to see how it's going to play out. I mean, it's you're going to have. Realistically speaking, I can't see that they'd be able to get higher than the end of the second round. So, you're going to have another 25 to 30 names coming off of the board between now and then. So, we'll see. I mean, they still have needs to address. There's no question about that. I still look at the offensive line. We haven't even talked about defense, things that they could potentially do to the defense. We've talked about linebacker. I still think edge rusher, if there's someone that falls into an area where they would feel comfortable, whether it's where one of their picks currently or whether it's moving up a few spots. I still think that's a position that they could address. So there's still plenty of things that they can try to do to make this football team better, both now and for the future. So certainly going to be very, very interesting, although I highly doubt anything's going to approach the drama of that 45-minute period or so on Thursday night.
Well, last thing on the Jackson thing, because we were never going to get to the last thing, but boy, if they were looking for a shakeup, right? A shakeup for fans to wake up on Friday morning and say they did what? What?
Yeah.
This was a shakeup. I mean, if you feel like the thing has gotten stale or tired or, a little too much Ozzie, a little too much Eric, a little too much Harbaugh, a little too much Flacco, that clearly there is fatigue amongst the fan base, for better or for worse. Maybe it might be the worst thing they've ever done. They may never win around here when Harbaugh and Flacco leave, right? I mean, you don't know, right? We wonder that after Billick left, right? And after Ray Lewis left and all. And they're still looking to win after Ray Lewis left, right? So that question will still be there. But, for shock value and for here we are at a time when, and maybe this is your little chance to weave Oriole baseball into this, the Orioles were losing their 19th game in 25 tries at that time, and the Ravens can't play for 6 more months, and you say, what are the Ravens doing to get better? Well, if you're a Flacco hater, you got satiated, on Thursday night, right?
Yeah, I mean, the people that have blamed Joe for all their problems should be doing a little jig. I mean, they should be thrilled because I equate this to, this is them saying that Joe was their biggest problem. So, we'll see. I think the one thing that we haven't talked about too much, I'm not so sure that this doesn't signal that John Harbaugh has more job security than we thought. Because if you're John Harbaugh and you need to win and it's playoffs or bust, why in the hell are you in support of Lamar Jackson coming on board then? Because he's not playing this year, presumably, and if he is, that means Flacco's either hurt or is playing poorly. So this leads me to believe, especially when you start connecting the dots and realize Marty Mornhinweg did work with Michael Vick in Philadelphia in 2010, even though it's a long time ago, and we're suddenly putting a lot of faith in Marty Mornhinweg after not having much the last 2.5 years or so. But that's beside the point. They brought in James Urban, who was in Philadelphia with Mornhinweg and with Vic. And they also have Greg Roman, who worked with Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco and worked with Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo. So I think, there's an argument to be made that this signals that maybe John Harbaugh has a longer leash than people think. And it's very well possible John Harbaugh is going to outlive Joe Flacco in this organization, which I think everyone assumed that they would kind of be tied at the hip. And I think that was a fair assumption to make when you consider how these things typically work. But
well, if you like John and you're comfortable with John and you're Steve and John's going to go coach the Chiefs or something if you throw him out and you're going to have to go find another John and Eric and John work well together, then I don't have any problem with that. But it was a monumental night. I mean, we'll be talking about it for a long, long time, right? I mean, I guess the long tail of this is it really is it's chess, it's not checkers.
Oh, sure. I mean, and that's why, people that have tried to marginalize this is big. And again, this isn't taking a quarterback in the 4th round that, okay, might push Joe a little bit. Maybe he's better than you think. Maybe Flacco gets hurt and gets Wally pipped. No, this is a 1st-round quarterback they took. This is big. This signals that you don't have confidence in Flacco. This signals that you are looking to move on from him. But like I said, with some of the coaching dynamics at work here, whether you trust that or not, you certainly look at the history of the individuals that I mentioned, Mornhinweg, Urban, and Greg Roman, and you kind of say, well, maybe they took Lamar Jackson with the distinct idea that those are going to be guys pivotal in his development. And if that's the case, then it doesn't really make sense to view this year as being playoffs or bust for John Harbaugh and his staff. So that makes me think that maybe there is more security there, despite Steve Bisciotti not even 3 months ago acknowledging that he considered replacing John Harbaugh. But at the same time, he also said at the time that the Ravens have bigger fish to fry than finding Joe Flacco's replacement, his heir apparent, and we saw how that worked out. So who knows?
Bigger fish to fry, right?
yeah. I mean, this is, like I said, what happened on Thursday night really changes everything we thought we knew about this organization, quite frankly, and we'll see how it plays out. Lamar Jackson could be the next great or the greatest quarterback in the history of the franchise when it's all set.
Or he could be Jimmy Garoppolo if Flacco goes out and throws for 4,600 yards this year, right?
Maybe. I mean, although I'm not necessarily...
Well, Flacco's going to have that opportunity. I mean, Flacco's going to have a chance to go win 12 games this year.
Yeah, but if you're asking him to do that, then I'd say, well, why didn't you go put a little more around him that can actually help him rather than the guy that's wanting to take his job. But we'll see. I guess stranger things have happened, but I'd say the Alex Smith scenario is far more likely than the Jimmy Garoppolo scenario here. I think if we're being realistic about it, if he has a solid season, if he has his best season since 2014, then I think you're more inclined then to look to trade him, or maybe you hold on to him for one more year. But again, then you're starting to get into that territory of, are you really maximizing the investment, the draft capital investment you've made in Lamar Jackson? That's why, this in-between territory here I'm not a big fan of until we start seeing some clarity at some point here, you would think, over the next 12 months.
Well, at some point, Joe's going to be heard from, too, right? So
yeah,
Joe's going to have to say, and, I already tell you what Joe's going to say. Joe's going to say what he said 2 weeks ago when we asked him, which was, hey, there's going to be another guy here, and, I think I'm the guy, and I'll go out and play like the guy and let him bring anybody they want to bring in here. I mean, this is an interesting fire under the ass of Flacco, who sort of, kind of, It may be a good thing for Joe Flacco, quite frankly.
I think it's a good thing for him, probably, to increase the chances of, if he plays better this year, it's going to help him maybe continue to play on the same contract, and the Ravens trade him to whatever team's looking for a quarterback. I mean, there's definitely possibilities there. I think Joe's going to say the right things, but I can't imagine this sits all that well with him, especially when, even though he hasn't been saying it, plenty of guys like you and me have been saying that they haven't exactly done a great job building around him the last few years.
Well, every number would support that. From draft picks to money to him waking up on Friday morning and saying he might have been in bed. I don't know. Who knows with him, right? So, he might not have been watching. Literally, somebody like me might have texted him and told him. Who knows whether Harbaugh texted him or not? I don't know. But a lot of that relationship for him on Thursday night, he learned where he stood if they gave him a heads up earlier in the day and saying, "Look, we might chase this quarterback," or "Hey, we just drafted this quarterback," or his dad just texted him or woke him up at 11 o'clock and said, "You just see what happened?" I'm interested to see how that was handled and how that was couched, right? Certainly, Brett Favre and the Aaron Rodgers thing is sort of a legendary story, right? So, there's that story began at 11:40 on Thursday night for him and for the organization and where he stands as well. But I know he thinks he can still play. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, I think he has confidence in himself, but is it going to be kumbaya, or is there going to be tension? And I think that's fair. I don't think anyone can sit here and say that Joe Flacco is going to come in and embrace Lamar Jackson and take him under his wing. I don't see that. I think it's going to be much more a case of, I think Flacco is going to feel threatened, and that's not to say he's going to be a lousy teammate to him, but you mentioned the Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers thing. They weren't buddy-buddy.
Oh, the Joe Montana, Steve Young story.
Yeah, they weren't buddy-buddy. So,
right, yeah.
I don't expect Joe Flacco to be buddy-buddy with Lamar Jackson. I don't expect him to be a jerk to him either. But this is a very distinct change in how Joe Flacco is viewed by the organization and how Joe Flacco is going to perceive others, how he perceives people looking at him. So, it's definitely going to be interesting once Lamar Jackson's in the building and OTAs get going and they get into mini camp and then training camp, and let's say Lamar Jackson plays the second half of the second preseason game and lights it up and has 3 touchdowns, and again, this thing could be pretty uncomfortable. I think anyone who just assumes this is going to be harmonious and Flacco's going to be cool with it, I think he's going to say the right things, but I can't imagine this sits too well with him, quite frankly, especially when you consider the lack of draft picks, the lack of free agent dollars put into making the offense better.
Yeah, you could have gotten me a tackle or a center or a wide receiver. Right, exactly. Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we got plenty of time to talk about it. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. Plenty of draft ahead, plenty of bad baseball ahead. I'm sure the Capitals will do something over the weekend to piss me off by Sunday. And, of course, the Brigade are playing at home on Saturday. I'm wearing the Brigade hat. The Albany Empire, it's 3 o'clock on Saturday. Come down and see Randy Hipper throw the ball around. It's at the Royal Farms Arena. I got Rofo Kona Blend in my cup, and you should Get the mobile app and download that so you get free fried chicken. Watch the third round of the draft late into the night on Friday night. BaltimoreBrigade.com and Monumental Sports. Download the app. Watch the games. Don't forget Ron Jaworski going to join us next week as the Philadelphia Soul come to the Rofo Arena next Friday night. Little indoor football, Arena Football League. Let them go throw it around there. If you're all fired up about football, go see them. Also brought to you by our friends at Costas Inn. Good enough for the Today Show. Good enough for my mom. I got to get down there and get some fat crabs, some cold beer. The legend always continues at Costas Inn, where they have delicious pit beef, too. A lot of folks don't know that about the pit beef down there. But during the lunch, my dad stopped at Costas Inn back in the day many times, got some pit beef. CostasInn.com. The legend continues there as well. I also got to tell you about the Maryland Jockey Club. Our entries now in the morning newspaper as well as on the front of our website. Preakness coming up in a couple of weeks. You'll want to be there for that. And, of course, the Pink Festival, which has become a huge day on the Friday before. That's the 18th as they run the Black-Eyed Susan and the Preakness. Racing ahead, my wife and I are headed down to Laurel for the Kentucky Derby next week. So check out the entries on the front of WNST.net. I am Nestor. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.